Showdown at the Chancellery, and Peter Altmaier confirms exactly what I've been saying for days. We will probably only get snap elections at the beginning of next year. He backs up this interview he gave yesterday with the same information I've been telling you for days. This government has no strength left. Have you heard anything about how things ended at the Chancellor's office last night? So stay tuned, watch this video, and if you want to support this channel, I would really appreciate a like and a subscription.
So we once had a slogan over 50 years ago that said during the election campaign, "It all depends on the Chancellor," and that describes our constitutional reality very well.
Altmaier, let me briefly remind you, you also said in that campaign slogan that the SPD would destroy the country. I mean, that's what you've done now, and as for the Greens, well, Utopia Schiff, we all remember, that was 50 years ago. People actually thought that, among others, the SPD could also destroy NATO. So please don't use any subtle framing here, but what he's about to say is actually really interesting because it actually underlines exactly what we're seeing here. And please always keep in mind the video about why the federal president might be able to prevent snap elections, and that purely from a legal standpoint. I then made a huge video about it. He just has to suggest another option to this federal government, for example, if they could come to an agreement, which would then be obsolete in January, so you wouldn't have to do all of this anymore. Then this federal president would basically be stepping down. And I still believe that there will be a majority for the federal president, more likely on the CDU side than in any other part of the current government that we are seeing right now.
I have an idea of what Friedrich Merz and the expert commission are considering when it comes to pensions. And when the federal chancellor said it would only be a basic safety net, it would have been good if there had already been some initial key points.
And as a result, the union lost a solid 3% in the polls, roughly speaking. I've been following this a bit, while at the same time on the other side, the AfD could simply get higher margins. If there had been any key points on this in this case, then the union would have dropped even further. And that's just a fact. And let's be honest, the AfD is currently at 28%, and the union is even further down at 22%. If we keep playing this game, well, that means that the AfD gains another 8% every year because the union is incapable of pursuing centrist policies. Then let's calculate how much will be left of 22% in 3 years. Feel free to write in the comments below if you can calculate it and what you think, what percentage the union will have left then.
So if I understand you correctly, Friedrich Merz can't do it, neither in terms of communication nor when it comes to delegating.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, the answer is -2. And what Ms. Drostedorf says is actually exactly the point that really, well, I have to say it like this, really weighs on all of us here. This chancellor just can't do it. Every day there's something new. The statements he sometimes makes aren't even noticed anymore. And his voter base keeps slipping further and further and wants a change here in Germany. By what means, it doesn't matter at all. We can also see this in the fact that the left is getting stronger and the Greens are also getting stronger. By now, we live in a culture where we say to ourselves, hey, I think Robert Habeck from the Greens was actually a bit better than what we have today. Specifically, the government around Klingbeil and the grassroots. Scholz was a better chancellor because he simply did less, factually, than Friedrich Merz does today, who has actually failed with his life's work. If it comes to us governing for another 3 years, no matter how they try to sell it to us today, because the problem is that he lies nonstop. Yes, then the CDU and also the SPD will eventually fall below the 5% threshold. Why? Because nobody believes these people anymore, and because everyone now sees it as a personal attack. And even if Welz says we need to have a little more trust, we had that for a year, but by now they've completely destroyed it. That's how it is. That the CDU's core voter base is continuing to collapse and people are simply voting for other parties.
So, where the three parties, CDU, CSU, and SPD, sit together late into the night and try to find solutions, that part hasn't worked satisfactorily so far.
That's right. I completely agree with that. What happened last night? Last night was the so-called D-Day night. Tonight, everything will be decided about how this government will move forward. And the new situation, well, nothing. Nothing. Until this morning at 6:55, and now hundreds of thousands of people are waiting to see what happens next here. Among them is the DGB and also people who want relief. They want to know specifically this morning what happens next. But the news has completely dried up. Why? Well, now they're not releasing anything anymore. Not even anymore. When they left the Chancellery, or whether they might even still be sitting in the Chancellery. And any reasonable person knows you find the best solutions from morning until afternoon, or possibly when you get back together the next morning. Working late into the night is actually always counterproductive.
Because if the traffic light coalition has collapsed, if the Grand Coalition also breaks up, to be honest, I don't see how stable, reliable majorities can be formed in the short term.
Which would basically mean snap elections, in fact. And I like to say this as a father, and I want to say it very, very clearly. Have you ever looked your son in the face while he stood before you covered in blood? No? And then the next question you ask is, was it a Michael? Was it a Christian or someone like that? No, it wasn't a Michael. It wasn't a Christian. And at the same time, this chancellor stands up and says, Michael, from the bottom of my heart, yes, we've solved the migration crisis. And we people, yes, see, our jobs are disappearing. Our children, yes, come home covered in blood. And the problems haven't been solved, and that's why, in my opinion, the Chancellor doesn't deserve any respect anymore. And just as I said, Mr. Altmaier mentioned it, early elections at the beginning of next year. By the way, I'm also in favor of that. Or rather, I believe that's exactly the right time, because then the federal president won't have a say anymore. And about the short notice. Right? These short-term majorities that can't be secured right now will look a bit different in the longer term. At the latest, when there's a new federal president. And if you just rein in this leftist mob here in Germany a little,